You've been told to fight the darker parts of yourself, to suppress the anger, hide the jealousy, silence the thoughts that don't fit the image you want to show. You've been told those parts are dangerous, that the only way to be good is to push them away. But here's the truth no one wants to admit. The more you fight your shadow, the stronger it becomes. The more you reject it, the more it finds ways to invade your life, in ways you can't predict and can't control. That part of you that lashes out, withdraws, or sabotages you at the worst possible moment. It's not some alien intruder, it's you. It's the part of you that's been carrying the truths you didn't want to face. The part you've locked in the basement for so long that it's learned to break the locks. And for INFJs and INTJs, this shadow is tied to the function you've spent your whole life avoiding, extroverted sensing. It's the raw, unfiltered, unpredictable now. It's everything you've worked to control and contain, which is why, when it bursts out, it doesn't feel like you at all. If you keep treating it like a threat, it will keep showing up as chaos, in arguments you never meant to start, decisions you regret instantly, silence that feels more like shutdown than peace. But if you learn to walk with it instead of against it, it becomes your most reliable ally, the source of energy, clarity, and presence you didn't even know you had. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why your shadow keeps winning and the first step to making it work for you instead of against you. And we're going to start right now. Think about the last time you completely lost yourself. Maybe you'd promised you'd stay calm. This time, you'd be the composed one, the rational one. But then something small happened. A comment, a look, a delay. And suddenly, you were in it. Words coming out sharper than you intended, or a wall of silence slamming down before you could stop it. And afterward, the shame crept in. You told yourself, that wasn't me. You replayed it in your head, wishing you could take it back. You blamed stress, circumstances, maybe even the other person. But here's the uncomfortable truth. It was you, not the you show the world, but the you that lives in your shadow. The part you've labeled immature, reckless, or wrong. The part you've trained yourself to keep locked away until it forces itself out. For INFJs and INTJs, this can take a few familiar forms. A single, sharp comment that cuts deeper than you meant and leaves you wondering why you said it at all. A rush of impulsive decisions, spending money, quitting something, saying yes to an opportunity you already know will drain you. Or the opposite, disappearing into silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the frozen, empty kind, where you can't seem to find the words or the will to act. You've built an identity around being composed, perceptive, and principled. You like being the one who sees the bigger picture, who can rise above the noise. So when this other you shows up, it feels like a betrayal, and your instinct is to push it down harder, to try to wrestle back control. But here's the trap. That control is an illusion. The shadow keeps score. And every time you bury it, you give it more power to erupt next time. Right now, grab a notebook or open your phone notes. Write down the last 3 times you felt completely unlike yourself. Moments when you reacted in a way that didn't match the person you believe yourself to be. Don't explain them, don't justify them, just write them. These moments are your first glimpse of the battlefield where your shadow fights for your attention. In a moment, I'll show you why these moments keep repeating, and why every attempt to shut them down has only made them stronger. Here's the part no one explains when they tell you to control yourself. Self-control isn't just about willpower. It's about what's living under the surface. And what's under the surface for you isn't random, it's your shadow. Carl Jung described the shadow as the set of qualities, emotions, and instincts you've rejected or repressed. Not because they're all bad, but because at some point you decided they were unacceptable. Some of these are emotions you were punished for as a child. Others are traits you learned would make you unlovable, unprofessional, or unsafe. And some are impulses so fast and fleeting that you don't even consciously notice them anymore, but your shadow does. For INFJs and INTJs, there's a very particular pattern here. Your dominant function, introverted intuition, thrives on long-term vision, controlled environments, and a deep sense of meaning. Your shadow, however, is tied to your inferior function, extroverted sensing, which lives in the raw, unfiltered now. It's the part of you that acts without a plan, responds to what's right in front of you, and trusts instinct over strategy. And because this doesn't match the story you tell about yourself, the careful one, the composed one, the principled one, you've spent your whole life avoiding it. You think it's messy, unpredictable, and dangerous, so you keep it in the dark. Here's the problem. The shadow doesn't disappear just because you lock the door. It grows, it watches, it waits. You live mostly in the world of the mind, analyzing, forecasting, running mental simulations for every possible outcome. Meanwhile, the shadow gathers all the impulses you've ignored. The urge to act without overthinking, the spark to speak your mind without rehearsing, the desire to feel something fully, without censoring or categorizing it. You think avoiding these impulses is being responsible. But in reality, you're feeding a pressure valve. And when that valve blows, the loop looks like this. Avoidance. You ignore or suppress the impulse. Build up. The shadow stores it, fuels it. Eruption. Under stress, the shadow bursts out through your inferior function. Shame. You tell yourself, that wasn't me. Deeper avoidance. You tighten the lid, which only ensures the next eruption is bigger. For INFJs, that eruption might be tie/say grip mode, cutting people down with surgical logic, escaping into sensory indulgence, or becoming hypercritical and emotionally distant. For INTJs, it might be say grip mode, sudden moral rigidity, impulsive pleasure-seeking, or emotional volatility that feels completely foreign to your usual self. And here's the kicker. The problem isn't that you have these reactions. The problem is you're not listening to what they're trying to tell you before they get that loud. You've been treating these signals like intrusions instead of invitations. Over the next week, every time you feel an impulse you want to dismiss, a thought, a desire, a flash of irritation, write it down before you explain it away. No judgment, no editing, just capture it. This is your first step toward meeting your shadow before it meets you. In the next part, we'll look at what happens when you keep ignoring these signals and why your shadow doesn't just wait quietly in the dark. You might think ignoring your shadow keeps it under control, that if you just stay disciplined, keep your emotions in check and push through, you'll eventually outgrow those reactions. But the opposite is true. Carl Jung warned that what you resist not only persists, but grows in size. When you keep the shadow out of sight, you're not weakening it, you're condensing it, like pressure building inside a sealed container. And the day that seal breaks is the day you meet what Jung called a grip state, when your inferior function hijacks the controls and you feel like a stranger in your own skin. For INFJs, grip stress often looks like a Taisei takeover. The warmth and empathy of Fei evaporate, replaced by cold, surgical logic. You catch yourself nitpicking flaws in people's words, dismantling arguments not to help but to wound, or retreating into sensory indulgence, comfort food binges, impulsive online shopping, reckless spending. You might stay up all night lost in meaningless activities, just to avoid feeling anything real. It's the I don't care anymore mode that shocks you as much as it shocks everyone else. For INTJs, grip stress pulls you into say territory. The usual Tay precision gets hijacked by personal moral outrage, hypersensitivity to slights, or a sudden craving for intense physical sensation. You might slam the brakes on long-term projects, burn bridges in moments of righteous fury, or seek escape in thrill-seeking behavior. Anything from risky adventures to sensory overindulgence. Here's the cruel part. These episodes don't just drain you in the moment, they leave a residue. You wake up the next day not just regretting what happened, but questioning whether you can trust yourself at all. And that erosion of self-trust is exactly what drives you deeper into avoidance, starting the cycle again. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder you push it down, the more force it has when it escapes. That's your shadow. And unlike a beach ball, it doesn't just bounce harmlessly away. It hits you, and it hits the people around you. When your shadow bursts out, it can fracture relationships in ways that no apology can fully repair. Friends begin to walk on eggshells. Colleagues start to wonder if they can rely on you when things get stressful. Loved ones brace themselves for which version of you they might encounter, the calm, visionary, or the explosive stranger. And here's the part most people miss. Every eruption makes the shadow bolder. It learns that it can take over when it wants. It starts showing up sooner, with less provocation, because it knows you'll still try to shove it back down instead of facing it directly. This is why integration isn't optional, not if you want to stop living at the mercy of these eruptions. You can't willpower your way out of a cycle you're secretly fueling. The only way out is through conscious engagement with the parts of yourself you've been trying to exile. Think back to your last shadow eruption, the moment you said, did, or decided something that didn't feel like you. Write down your answers to these 3 questions. What happened right before it? What emotion or impulse had I been ignoring leading up to it? What did I feel immediately after? The goal isn't to shame yourself. It's to trace the fuse before the explosion, so you can see where you might have stepped in sooner. In the next part, we'll talk about how to confront your shadow directly, without letting it consume you in the process. By now, you've seen the cycle: avoidance, build-up, eruption, shame, repeat. You know the shadow doesn't just vanish when you ignore it. But here's the part that scares most people. You can't integrate something you refuse to face. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That means you don't chase perfection. You make space for what's uncomfortable. Confronting the shadow is not the same as indulging it. You don't hand it the keys and let it run wild. You also don't keep it locked in the basement. You meet it at the door, look it in the eye, and start asking questions. The challenge for INFJs and INTJs is that you're used to approaching life through analysis, strategy, and future focus. Your shadow lives in the immediate, the raw, the sensory, which means confrontation will pull you out of your comfort zone. And that's exactly the point. Here's what confronting the shadow can look like in practice. Active imagination, a Jungian tool where you visualize meeting your shadow as if it were a person. You let it speak. You ask it why it's here, what it wants, what it's protecting you from. You don't argue, you listen. Dream tracking. Your shadow doesn't just speak through emotions. It shows up in your dreams as symbols, characters, even hostile figures. Keep a notebook by your bed. Each morning, jot down what you remember, especially images that provoke discomfort. Safe, inferior function practice. For NIDOMs, this means intentionally stepping into controlled sensory experiences. INFJs. Try activities that push you to respond in the moment. Improv games, spontaneous conversations, a new physical hobby. INTJs. Engage in unstructured, playful activities without a productivity goal, cooking without a recipe, exploring a new place without an agenda. The first time you do this, it may feel pointless or even irritating. That's the resistance. It's your mind saying, "We don't do this. This isn't who we are." And that voice, that's the shadow telling you you're getting close. The key is containment. You don't need to dump years of repressed emotion all at once. You give the shadow a safe place to speak and a safe way to act before it chooses an unsafe one for you. Example for INFJs. If you tend to withdraw when conflict arises, practice expressing a small, honest irritation in a low-stakes conversation. Don't wait until resentment boils over. Example for INTJs. If you tend to over-control every variable, let someone else plan an outing and resist the urge to optimize it. These aren't just personality exercises, they're symbolic acts. You're telling your unconscious, "I'm willing to meet you halfway." And when you do, something changes. The shadow stops being just a saboteur. It becomes an informant, bringing you the energy, creativity, and adaptability you've been missing. Choose one safe, controlled way to let your shadow act this week. Give it space for 10 minutes a day, then write down what happened and how it felt. In the next part, we'll see how to take these encounters and build them into a lasting alliance, so your shadow works with you, not against you. Confronting the shadow is the breakthrough moment. But if you stop there, it will fade back into the dark, and you'll be back in the same loop within weeks. Integration is what makes the changes stick. Integration means you're no longer relating to the shadow as an intruder. You're using it as a source of information, not identity, not shame, but insight. It's the difference between thinking, "I can't believe I felt that," and asking, "Why did I feel that, and what does it tell me?" For INFJs, a healthy integration means you can keep your Fey warmth and your Nai vision, but you also allow your Tai and Say to surface without guilt. You can deliver precision and truth without cutting people down. You can immerse yourself in the present moment without feeling you've abandoned your future. For INTJs, it means you keep your Te precision and strategic thinking, but you let Phi and Say give depth and richness to your experience. You can act on your values without becoming rigid, and you can savor sensory experiences without needing to justify them as productive. Here's what integration looks like in real time: shadow check-ins. When you feel a sudden emotional spike, you pause before reacting and ask, "Shadow, is that you?" This isn't just a cute question. It's a pattern interrupt that reminds you the shadow is a part of you, not an invading force. Negotiated impulses. Instead of suppressing every instinct, you experiment with safe expressions. Feel a sudden urge to withdraw. Negotiate with yourself. "I'll take 10 minutes alone, then rejoin." Want to speak a blunt truth? Try framing it with clarity, but without cruelty. Trigger mapping. Keep a running log of what situations wake up your shadow. You'll start seeing patterns, certain people, environments, or topics that consistently bring it forward. Balancing acts. Pair your dominant habits with shadow-informed actions. If you've spent the week in deep analysis, dedicate an hour to physical, unplanned activity. Say. If you've been running a strict plan, give yourself one evening to follow curiosity instead of a schedule. The goal isn't to control the shadow. It's to give it regular, healthy outlets so it doesn't have to crash the party to be heard. Over time, you'll notice subtle shifts, fewer explosive grip episodes, more emotional flexibility, a sense that you can handle both the long game and the present moment. And perhaps the most important change, you stop being afraid of yourself. The shadow isn't lurking, waiting to wreck your life. It's walking beside you, contributing perspective you didn't have before. Example, an INFJ who once avoided direct conflict might now calmly express boundaries before resentment builds. An INTJ who used to reject spontaneous plans might now say yes to a last-minute invite, not because it's efficient, but because it's alive. These aren't just personality tweaks. They're signs that your inner system is cooperating instead of competing. This week, pick one impulse you would normally shut down. Negotiate with it instead of rejecting it. Find a safe, contained way to let it live and write down what happened. In the final part, we'll talk about what it means to live with the shadow, how to make this a cycle of growth instead of a cycle of sabotage. Here's the truth that almost no one tells you about shadow work. Integration doesn't mean the shadow disappears. It means you learn to live with it, and in doing so, you stop fearing it. The shadow is cyclical. It will return in new forms, at new levels of your growth. You'll still feel sudden impulses, flashes of emotion, old patterns tugging at your sleeve. The difference is that after integration, these moments no longer throw you into panic or shame. For INFJs and INTJs, this shift is profound. You've spent most of your life trying to stay above chaos, controlling outcomes, avoiding messy situations, keeping your world predictable. Living with the shadow means you're no longer destabilized by unpredictability. You can be in the moment without feeling you've lost the plot of your life. Think of it like sailing. Before integration, every gust of wind feels like a threat. You grip the wheel tighter, trying to fight the elements. After integration, you learn to work with the wind. You adjust the sails instead of bracing for impact. Here's what this looks like in daily life. You notice a surge of irritation and think, interesting, what's this about? Instead of snapping or shutting down, you catch yourself withdrawing and ask, do I need space or am I avoiding something? You find yourself in a sensory moment, the smell of rain, the taste of a meal, and you let yourself enjoy it without mentally skipping ahead to what's next. This is what living with the shadow offers: more range, more depth, more truth. It also means you're less threatened by contradiction. An INFJ can hold space for their idealism and their cynicism without feeling like a fraud. An INTJ can be both calculating and compassionate without fearing they've lost their edge. But here's the caution: the shadow is patient. If you slip into old habits of avoidance, it will quietly start gathering energy again. That's why living with the shadow isn't a one-time breakthrough. It's a practice. Ways to keep the shadow integrated. Return rituals. When you notice the shadow surfacing, have a go-to process for engaging it. Journaling, a symbolic walk, a sensory reset, seasonal check-ins. Every few months, review your shadow notes. What's showing up more often, less often? Shadow conversations. Periodically revisit active imagination or dream work, even when things are going well. Living with the shadow also changes your relationships. People who once manipulated your reactivity will find it harder to get a rise out of you. Those who valued you only for your persona will drift away. And the ones who remain will meet more of your whole self, not just the curated version. And yes, that means some people will misunderstand you. They'll say you've changed, when in reality, you've just stopped abandoning yourself to keep them comfortable. That's a cost. But it's also a filter, because when you live with your shadow, you stop attracting relationships that depend on your self-erasure. You start building connections that can hold the full truth of who you are. Create a return ritual for the next time your shadow surfaces. Something you can do in 5 to 10 minutes to meet it directly instead of suppressing it. Keep it simple, repeatable, and meaningful. In the outro, we'll tie everything together: the journey from fighting the shadow to walking alongside it, and why this is the real mark of psychological maturity. We began this journey in the same place most people start, standing across from the shadow like it's an enemy to be defeated. We've been taught to believe that the parts of us we don't like should be locked away, hidden, starved of attention. But we've also seen where that path leads. Explosions of behavior we can't explain, relationships strained or broken, and a growing fear that maybe we can't trust ourselves after all. And yet, in each wave of this process, we've uncovered something different. The shadow isn't here to destroy you. It's here to balance you, to show you the sides of yourself you've neglected, even if it has to use chaos to get your attention. For INFJs, that might mean reclaiming your immediacy, letting say bring color and presence into your carefully crafted vision. For INTJs, it might mean letting Phi and Say remind you that life isn't just a plan to be executed, but a landscape to be lived in. You've learned that avoidance feeds the shadow's power. That confrontation is uncomfortable, but necessary. That integration is not about control, but cooperation. And that living with the shadow is a lifelong practice, one that refines you into someone with more range, more resilience, and more truth. This is why Jung called individuation the privilege of a lifetime, because it's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. It's about having the courage to see yourself completely without flinching. But here's the final truth. This work will cost you. You will lose some people. You will outgrow some spaces. You will no longer fit the version of you that others have gotten used to. And at first, that emptiness can feel like a loss. But in time, you'll see it for what it is. Space. Space to fill with relationships that meet you in your wholeness. Space for choices that align with your values, not your fears. Space to live without the constant, exhausting effort of hiding parts of yourself. One day, you'll look back at the version of you who fought the shadow, who lived in fear of it, and you'll see how small that life was compared to what you have now. you'll see that the shadow never wanted to break you. It wanted to wake you. So here's my challenge to you. From this moment on, stop fighting your shadow. When it knocks, answer. When it speaks, listen. When it asks for space, give it a safe one. Because every time you do, you become less reactive, less fragile, less fragmented, and you become more of what you were always meant to be, a whole human being, grounded in both light and dark. If you've made it this far, write in the comments, "I'm ready to walk with my shadow." Not just because it's a public commitment, but because naming your intention is a way of anchoring it. The shadow will return. It always does. But now, when it does, you'll know what to do. You'll have the tools, the awareness, and the courage to welcome it as part of yourself. And that's the moment you stop being at war and start being at peace.